didn't have a mask on or anything. They already could ID me. Made a decision to go ahead and restrain them.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Maya Mystery, and in today's video I want to talk to you guys about the psychopathic narcissist. And I know you're probably thinking, well, everyone you talk about on your channel could be classified as a psychopathic narcissist. And I know that is true because a lot of serial killers do fit this description. But the subject of today's video really takes the term psychopathic narcissist to the next level. And that's Dennis Rader, the bind, torture, kill killer, which was actually a name that he gave himself. And what's interesting about this is that it pretty much sums up the behaviour and character of Dennis Rader. He was someone who really wanted to take control of the narrative of how he was portrayed. It was very obsessive and compulsive, actually. But those words weren't the words that stick out to me the most. You see, Dennis actually was irritated by the lack of media coverage for his crimes, which, if that doesn't scream narcissist, I don't know what really will. And one quote that he did actually write in a letter, which stuck out to me amongst all others, was, "How many people do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper or some kind of national attention?" This was a man who was obsessed with his own celebrity status, and it was that obsession which would lead to him actually getting caught, and his need for the control of the narrative. So what kind of person was Dennis Rader? Well, to really understand him, I think we have to take a bit of a look into his past and a situation that he found himself in before he started committing the murders that he would be so famously known for. So Dennis Lynn Rader was born on March the 9th, 1945 in the unremarkable town of Wichita, Kansas. Sorry if you're from Wichita, Kansas, that's what it says. It was unremarkable. I've never been there, so that's not my personal opinion. Moving on. He was a member of 4 siblings. He was a quiet kid, smart, and was well behaved by all accounts. His family was very religious, and from every aspect, young Dennis Rader was a normal, harmless kid. However, he did have a really dark secret, and he admitted this later in life. Rader had a wild sexual fantasy of bondage. He was a young, developing sadomasochist, and he dreamed of tying up girls and having his way with them. But his desire for dominance was not entirely sexual. He admitted to killing cats and dogs by hanging them, and early in his teenage years he was caught by his mother. She was worried, but just passed it off as boyhood curiosity. Okay, I just have to stop right there. It's not as if he just killed one cat or one dog. He killed cats and dogs, numerous animals, and was passed off as boyhood curiosity. I don't know. That's a bit weird. But he did learn to hide his fantasies and actions better, and decided to keep them a secret from the world. As he continued on into high school, his fantasies became more and more of an obsession, and he became disinterested in school. As a result of his poor grades, he dropped out of Kansas Wesleyan College in Salina after only 1 year of school, and he joined the Air Force. And he actually served as a pilot in Vietnam until 1969. Upon his return, he took up multiple low-level jobs. He was a grocer, a worker on an assembly line, and finally settling as a glorified dog chaser or a code enforcer. Less than a year after returning to Kansas from Vietnam, Rader was married to Paula Dietz, a fellow Lutheran who had attended high school with him. After a few years of his low-level job and returning to a night school to earn an associate's degree, Rader began to fall back into the fantasy world of his youth. In 1974, Rader began his life as a serial killer. From his first victim to his last, Rader never lost total control. Even after his first murder in the Otero family, he actually, the term is, annihilated the family. He murdered all of them, and those were his first victims. He actually only murdered 10 people in 17 years, and in his own words said, "My desire for the feeling got stronger with each case, but I knew I would get caught." In 1975, Rader got a steady job for the first time in his life as a manager at ADT, a company based in Kansas. He also had his first of 2 children, Brian. For 2 years after his first murder, Rader went rogue, not doing anything illegal, but never leaving behind the scouting of victims. So basically, he actually had a list of people that he wanted to murder, but he only managed to murder a few people on that list. He said it was kind of like, throwing a fishing rod out to catch fish. Sometimes you would catch one, sometimes you wouldn't, which is very terrifying actually. From 1976 to 1991, Rader had 6 more victims. After the first few cases, Rader made his cases public, writing letters, which I talked about earlier. The first one was found in a library with actually really bad grammar and leaving behind the name the BTK Killer. Police were then hot on his trail, and after 1980 he never released another public letter and began to focus on building up a solid background as a citizen. He became a Cub Scout leader, which is terrifying, encouraging his son all the way to become an Eagle Scout, and he got even more involved in his church and built an ethos for him to hide behind in the public eye. In 91 he made his last kill, and after that he became a Scout Ranger. For a while he did go quiet. He was almost forgotten about all around the country. People just assumed he died or that he'd been institutionalized or something. Kids had become adults, and no one knew the story of the BTK Killer until the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders in 2004, when the papers released an article and a book was released within a month. This really bothered Dennis because he wanted to be the one to tell his own story. He was so infuriated that he began a series of 11 drops, all containing evidence that could be used against him. The drops often included letters from the BTK Killer himself, pictures of the murders, and even sometimes tools that he would have used to commit the murders. These little drops took about a year to complete, and after each one the FBI gained on the BTK Killer. Finally, on February the 25th, Dennis Rader was surrounded by police after leaving his office and heading to his car. So I also wanted to briefly talk about the modus operandi of the BTK Killer, Dennis Rader, because originally he didn't have an MO. His first kill was random, and he only chose the Otero family because he thought that Mrs. Otero was pretty. He then left a letter behind, of course, and by leaving letters behind, he knew he would be credited with the killings, and he was also able to tell the actual story for the killings, which obviously was part of his huge insatiable need for control. And he left behind his chosen name, like I said before. As his killings continued, he then began to develop a modus operandi. He would struggle to take on full families and escape cleanly. So he began to target older women who he knew would be alone, and then break in acting as if he was a government official. Once binded, he would tell the older ladies that he was about to rape them, just to cause panic and see it in their eyes. I don't even know what to say. That's absolutely horrific. After all of his killings were done and he was forgotten, he began his most infamous of signatures, which I talked about earlier, the drops, which would include handwritten accounts of the killings and pictures of the actual acts. By doing this, the BTK Killer actually was led to his own capture, which actually may have had a purpose, if you think about it. This way he could confess his crimes in court and take credit for all his actions. He might have actually wanted to get this story straight, which really speaks to the narcissism of this person, if you could call them that, and the intense need for control. I wanted to share something with you actually about Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader was actually diagnosed by a psychologist named Robert Mendoza. Robert actually diagnosed Dennis with narcissistic, antisocial and obsessive compulsive personality disorders. He observed that Dennis had a grandiose sense of self and a belief that he was special and therefore entitled to special treatment. It's really interesting with the obsessive compulsive personality disorders because the way he carried out his killings was very obsessive and compulsive, and his incredible need for control over his own narrative. It's not only narcissistic, but is very obsessive, compulsive as well. Something really interesting as well about Dennis is that his need to say that he was special. If you look at Dennis's life, he wasn't really overly special. And I know a couple of people have, talked about that before in other videos or in other coverage of this case. And I think, I'm not saying I'm not running anybody down. He doesn't want to do anything out of the ordinary, because we all want what we want. But Dennis really wanted to feel like he was different. And apart from these dark secrets and terrible actions, he was very ordinary. So that also speaks a lot about his psychology and his character. So I find a really interesting psychological perspective that I wanted to share with you guys on actually a blog. I'm going to link this blog below. There is references, but I don't know how credible it was, but it was one of the most interesting sort of takes on it because it links a lot of Dennis's behaviour. And I'm going to read out a part of it. It says, with no recorded traumatic experiences from his childhood, it might just be that Rader was born with a defected thalamus, causing him to feel no emotion whatsoever. This is ultimately a very likely answer, as the thalamus has recently been linked to obsessive compulsive disorder, otherwise known as OCD. A defected thalamus would explain his obsessive desire that he had for some of his victims. When the orbital frontal cortex sends worry signals to the thalamus, the brain has a pseudo-braking system to prevent the thalamus from becoming hyperactive. However, if this thalamus is defected, it will ignore the braking system altogether, causing the mindless random actions that are associated with obsessive compulsive disorder. In Rader's case, his compulsive behaviour is best exemplified by his later murders. He became obsessed with each of the victims, stalking their daily lives, finding out the minute details of their routines, and he worked for months actually on these cases and showed extreme perfectionism in an attempt to work out the best and most efficient way to perform the kill. The most likely answer to the Dennis Rader question is that he is compulsive. However, there are other aspects of his behaviour that belong under narcissistic traits. Rader, if he has NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, then there was an opportunity that he was pampered by his parents when he was a developing child. However, this might not be so because he does not begin to show his own desire for fame until later in the killing spree. After the murder of the Arturo family, in fact, Rader was so terrified of publicity that he waited a long time, despite his deepest desires to kill again. But this fear of being caught slowly went away with each successful kill, and there are two reasons to believe that he is a mild case of narcissism. The first was his reaction to the release of the 30th anniversary of Tour Murder article in the Wichita paper that was partnered with the release of the novel about the BTK Killer. Rader was excited by these releases, however he was infuriated that he was not being credited with this story and that it was not being told accurately, which screams like OCD. Like if you're that angry about it, it's a bit controlling, like, it's a bit, excessive. So in response, he started his drops telling the story in a broken way with eyewitness accounts and pictures of the actual act to tell the whole story. The second reason that Rader may have narcissism is his unexpected confession and admittance without remorse at the trial. He wanted to tell the story his way so bad so that the whole world knew that what he had done. He craved that attention. And the question is why? In my opinion, Dennis fits the title of psychopathic narcissist because he can't just be a psychopath without the narcissist, and he can't be a narcissist without the psychopathic traits as well. He's a perfect mixture of the two, like a lot of people actually. But all I have to say is that it's so interesting that it was his narcissism that was what led to him getting caught. And it's quite interesting because these dangerous psychopathic narcissists, you can actually use their narcissism against them so that justice will prevail. So there you have it. That was just a little tidbit of information from a blog I found online about the psychology of Dennis Rader, and I just thought it provided a different perspective, talking about the defected thalamus and the link to obsessive compulsive disorder, which obviously combined with psychopathy would make a case similar to Rader's. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye.